Love is nothingness. Love is infinite freedom. Love is formless consciousness. So when you die, literally what happens, and it doesn't matter whether this will happen to you through an awakening experience, through enlightenment, or this will happen to you on a psychedelic, or if this happens to you at the moment of your body's physical dying, whichever it happens on. For most of you, it'll be when your body physically dies. What'll happen is that your identity will completely dissolve. So this little contracted identity that you've developed over your lifetime, this will completely dissolve and you will melt and merge into the entire universe. You will become absolutely one and indistinguishable from everything else. And with this, your life will end. And you will become infinite. You will become totally formless. You will become the Godhead. And this very process of dissolution into total, absolute selflessness, this is the process of infinite love. This is the pinnacle of infinite love. So the tragedy of life, the beauty of life, is that we struggle for 80 years. We're born and then we struggle for 80 years thinking that we're struggling against death and we're struggling against fear and we're struggling against all the obstacles in life that interfere with our ability to have a good life. We struggle against all that. Finally, we lose that whole struggle and we die, and we think to ourselves that, oh man, this is going to be the worst thing ever, and everything beautiful about life is going to be gone, everything wonderful is going to be gone, and it's just going to be a bleak, empty nothingness, some sort of void of nihilism. Or maybe you tell yourself that you're going to go to heaven, some sort of afterlife in the clouds with 72 virgins and other sorts of materialistic images like that. And you tell yourself how terrible it would be if there wasn't a heaven. You tell yourself, oh, well, Leo, if there's not this beautiful heaven with the pearly gates and the 72 virgins, then it's just going to be blank, empty nothingness, and it's going to be terrible. It's going to be the worst. Like, what kind of cruel, evil God would create such a reality where instead of going to heaven, I would just end up in an existential, nihilistic void forever. But what you don't realize is that is infinite love. That is the very essence of heaven. Heaven is not a material place. Heaven is the total absence of self. It's completely becoming unlimited. Unlimited in every way. That's infinite love. That's heaven. That's nirvana. That's paradise. It's total formlessness. And while it's threatening to us as little egos, as little formed entities, it's threatening to us because it dissolves us. We lose all of our shape when this happens. Actually, what you discover in that process is you discover that is your true form. That is the happiest you'll ever be. That is the freest you'll ever be. This is existence and reality and goodness and love in its most pure form. In otherwise, completely formless. It's almost like, imagine we have a little bit of water. Let's say we have a liter of water here on Earth, and we can put it into different containers. We can put it into a tall glass, into a wide, flat dish. We can put it into various shapes, depending on the containers it takes, because, the water is fluid. We can even freeze it and carve it into some sort of sculpture. And here we have this ice sculpture. And there it is in its particular form. But then what happens is if we take this water and we just throw it out into the middle of empty outer space, the water what does it become? It just becomes a blob, an amorphous blob. We might imagine a sphere. Especially if it's like warmed up a little bit by the sun, just becomes like liquid water and just floats in a vacuum in 0G. And so it doesn't have any shape because it's being pulled equally in all directions, perfectly equally. Let's imagine this kind of scenario. And it's liquid water, or you could imagine liquid mercury, whatever, so that it's still liquid, even if it's out in the middle of space. It's cold out there, but whatever. So it's liquid, and it's a perfect sphere. See? And you might say, well, this is terrible from the point of view of an ice sculpture, because an ice sculpture needs to maintain a particular form, Otherwise, it stops being that. Literally, it dies if you break it apart into some other shape. But also, you could think of it as the following. You could think of it as when the water becomes a perfect sphere and loses all of its shape, that's when it's most essentially what it really is. It's amorphous. That is its truest nature. See, water is not an ice sculpture. Water is not tall. Water is not shallow. Water is not short. Water is not wide. Water is not a cube. Water is amorphous. That's its essence. See? And so that's all that really death is you're going from a particular shape that you've constructed and identified yourself with being, to being amorphous, being infinite, being omnipresent. And of course, to do this and to live from this place, and it is possible to live from this place, you don't need to actually physically die. To live from such a place, you would have to have no identity whatsoever. By having no identity, you have an infinite identity, which means you're completely universal and you're completely detached from any particular form. Now you can appreciate why the great sages and mystics and religious teachers have told you from the very beginning that attachment is the enemy of the spiritual path. And, going back all the way to Jesus in the Bible, he talks about how it's easier for, it's as hard for a rich man to get into heaven as it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, you see. So why does he say that? Because the rich man is attached to all these material attachments, to his success, to his wealth, to his power and fame, and all his accumulated houses and cars and all this sort of stuff. While you're attached to all those things, you can't become totally formless. You can't realize your total formless identity. And so you're always stuck in that particular form. And you think that form is so great, but what you don't realize is how great it is to lose all form altogether. And you're terrified. Not only do you not realize this, you're completely terrified of it. So no matter how much I sit here and I tell you about how death is absolute love and it's infinity and it's God and it's beautiful and it's wonderful and it's the best thing that'll ever happen to you, no matter how much I tell you all that, it doesn't matter. Because you're utterly terrified of it. Because you're so attached to your particular form.